For my 40th birthday party, my sweet wife had planned the most extraordinary celebration possible. She created the 70s themed party with many of my friends and family, disco ball, decorations. There were even records about that big with pictures of me on it and pictures of family and so forth. I mean, she had thought about every single detail. It's the party that people dream of having. And despite this incredible love that this person who should be sainted put into creating this beautiful birthday party, the only thing that I can ultimately remember is anxiety tainting this experience. At the end of the night, my nervous system had become so fried that I literally could not escape my own anxiety and had gotten into this very debilitated place that ultimately caused us to have a very negative experience. And if it was just one part of my life, that would be one thing, except this is the filter that I've lived most of my life through. And it isn't just a story about me, this is a story about you. And 1 in 10 of you ultimately are having a similar experience than I, and 1 in 10 of the children around us may be having a similar experience. And we don't look at it because we call these things normal. You know, the child that spazzes out every time there's too much noise, or they can't handle the experience of their shirt, or their ADHD. These are all nervous systems that are inherently unstable. And we may give one person the label of anxiety, the other person the label of ADHD, and this person has this, and this person has that. When you boil it down, there's enough of us who have nervous systems that just spaz out for no reason. And I've spent most of my life looking for their solution. I've done 5-day-long silent retreats. I have done meditations every day for 2 months. I have tried every supplement under the sun. And the meditation works, except as soon as I stop, the anxiety just rips right back. And what was incredible to me is, in the search of an answer, it came in the simplest form, and that was lithium. I had taken 2 milligrams of lithium once a day for 1 week. And within a week, my nervous system had changed. And I was in disbelief. I could not believe that of all of the work that I've done so far, as easily as taking a mineral in 2 milligram doses for a week, my nervous system would change. Now, as I mentioned lithium, the first thing that probably goes through your mind is that is a medication for psychotic people. And you would think, well, this guy kind of has a little bit of psychosis, right? He's a little crazy, you may think. And therefore, maybe lithium is the right medication for him, right? I was guilty of this thought before I finally did enough research and convinced myself to try it on myself. And I tried it on myself before I tried it on anyone else. And now I have at least 50, 60 people that have benefited in my practice from this treatment. But the moment we think about this, the moment we think of psychotic person, psychotic medication, when we think of this, we don't automatically think that, well, it's a mineral that we should be taking, and it's a mineral that actually changes multiple pathways in the human body, which could actually be tremendously healthy. You know, when we talk about magnesium, we don't say, well, magnesium is for the crazy people. We don't take magnesium, right? Everyone takes magnesium. And as soon as someone is having some difficulty sleeping or having whatever issues, you're like, why don't you take some magnesium? Why don't you take an Epsom salt bath? That's magnesium. We speak of magnesium without any bias, but lithium has so much tremendous stigma against it that we don't talk about it. And 1 in 10 of you are suffering in some way that could be so easily reversed if we change this conversation from medication for the psychotic to mineral that maybe everyone should be taking. And the problem is that lithium is not found in our multivitamins. It's not found in pretty much any supplement. It is found in supplements for children on the autistic spectrum only, at least as far as I found. Any of us that are drinking reverse osmosis water, and that could be purified water like Dasani, or your own filtration at home, you're probably not getting any lithium. And nowadays, other than seafood, which most of us avoid because of worry of contamination, outside of seafood, we probably are not getting lithium in any other source. The primary form of lithium intake for most people is actually through their water. And look at the water that a lot of us are drinking. Also, in certain water supplies, lithium just doesn't exist. So unless you buy high-quality spring water, or you happen to live in a certain area where there is more lithium naturally occurring in the water, because lithium is a salt, basically, a mineral salt that is released from rock into the water that we ingest. And interestingly, they have found that in communities where lithium is higher in the water supply, there's less prevalence of mental illness and mental challenge. And we're not talking megadoses. We're talking small amounts, 1 milligram here and there. In one in 1,000 of a dose, so 0.001%, in the minute doses, lithium actually becomes a critical mineral. Lithium changes epigenetic factors within our system, so it literally changes our genes. It turns on and turns off genes. And one of the genes that it helps turn on is a gene that it ultimately encodes for BDNF. And brain-derived neurotrophic factor is basically a fertilizer or nourisher of our brain cells. So we think of psychotic person, we don't think of an epigenetic factor that actually is important and critical for our brain health. BDNF helps form new neural connections, which is how we form memory. It prevents the death of neurons, which is how we end up getting dementia. Through this, it actually also basically strengthens the brain as an antioxidant in a way. It makes the brain more resilient to stress. So glutamate is a compound that irritates the brain. When you have high levels of BDNF, glutamate doesn't affect the brain. And that's something we don't talk about. When was the last time you heard someone say, lithium is a critical mineral that actually changes the expression of certain genes that can protect your brain? We don't talk about that. The other part that's really interesting about lithium is the experience that I had is related to how lithium impacts GABA receptors. So GABA is basically the braking system of the brain. So imagine you're driving a car, you're going down the freeway, right? You're going maybe 75, maybe you're speeding a little bit, you're going 85, and then you hit your brakes, except nothing happens. The car is just lunging ahead, and you're just like, holy cow, like, you know, I mean, imagine what that would be like. Your car is just lunging ahead, you can't stop it. Except that's your brain. That was my brain, because my brain literally did not have a stopping system because my GABA receptors were not working the way it should. For some people, when they take magnesium, they find an instant sense of calm. They sleep better, they're more relaxed. We see this in children often. And what magnesium does is that actually helps activate GABA receptors. It turns out that these GABA receptors also need lithium as a critical cofactor to help them work better. Lithium also helps release GABA from the cells into the synapse, the connection between the two cells. So there's more GABA in the synapse, the GABA receptors are working better. Suddenly the braking system of the car, or the brain, is finally working. And what was so interesting to me is within a week or two of taking lithium, I felt the same as when I had done daily meditation for a month, month and a half. And I still meditate, I still eat a really healthy diet, you know, I still do all of these other things to take care of myself, because by no means is lithium the only thing that fixes everything. I'm not saying that at all. It's one tool that we have overlooked. When you bring all of these things together, really remarkable things happen. Now, let me put this in another picture, because this is the part that makes this conversation so special to me, because this isn't about me, it may not even really be about you. It has a lot to do with a lot of the children around us. You see, 1 in 10 children have this thing called sensory processing disorder. 1 in 10. 10% of children have sensory processing disorder. What is sensory processing disorder? Sensory processing disorder is basically a scenario where the brain cannot integrate information effectively. And when there's too much information coming in, literally the brain just spazzes out. And these kids have temper tantrums, they lose their minds, they get freaked out, they withdraw. There's so many awful things that happen. And you know, a really beautiful story to depict this is, I have many children in my practice that have this, that we're watching. One of them was this 5.5, 6-year-old child that would go to school. And this 5.5, 6-year-old would go to school, except when it came to playtime, he would stand there in the corner. He would stand there in the corner of the playground and watch the other children play from afar, and could not go and play with these children because it was too overwhelming to him to be around these other children. The chaos that they created by the sounds they made, their unpredictable actions, were too much for this poor child. So he would literally stand there and watch these children at the playground and could not do anything about it. There are children that are labeled with ADHD, and we have put on medication that literally have this, except they're now 12 years old, and every time the clock ticks, every time the vent turns on, every time a bird chirps, every time the person taps their table with a pen, they hear all of it. They hear all of it, they sense all of it, and their brains could not shut it down. Why? The braking system in their brains do not work the way it should. I lost my mind my 40th birthday because I got to the point where there's so much going on that literally I just could not handle it. And I just wanted to retreat. These children experience the same thing. We put them on Ritalin, we put them on this medication, we label them with this. Their braking systems don't work. The most amazing thing that I have found is when these children are put on microdoses of lithium, 0.5 milligrams, 1 milligram, versus 1800 milligram, 0.5 milligrams, and it doesn't even have to be every day. I give them 50 milligrams of magnesium, and that combination, at least 40% of the time, normalizes their system. And in the case of this little 5-year-old, within 2 weeks, this child was back in the playground playing with these other children and engaging with them and having a great time because he wasn't spazzing out anymore. His brain couldn't handle the sensory experience. Now, these children, I still have them go to occupational therapy because there's other wiring that needs to happen. And again, this isn't just a fix. It is one tool to bring to the conversation. How many of you suffer from not having an effective braking system? And if you took microdoses of this inexpensive mineral, your life may change. I only wish that lithium was only relevant to that, because it would still make this conversation easy, but it's not. Lithium also happens to be a potent antioxidant and anti-inflammatory. You see, in some of the children that I was treating for the behavioral issues, I would give them lithium and suddenly their gut functions would improve. 2 or 3 cases of children that had chronic diarrhea, and we had tried every diet, we had tried every supplement, we had tried everything, and they would always have loose bowels. And I literally couldn't understand what was going on. We had done stool testing, we checked them for inflammatory bowel disease. I mean, you name it, we did it. We literally couldn't figure out why these children had loose stools. With the lithium, their stools normalized. And you know, I sat there for days and scratched my head. I'm like, how is this possible? It turns out that lithium impacts this other gene, and ultimately a protein called, or impacts the protein JSK3. Glycogen synthase kinase 3 ultimately influences this compound called NF-kappa beta. NF-kappa beta happens to be one of the most potent inflammatory potentiators within our system. It turns on the fire. Lithium turns down the fire. And there's this really interesting study that I've shared with you where they look at people with graft versus host disease related to the gut. So these are poor people that have had transplants. And in the midst of having this foreign object in their own body, sometimes their immune systems kick into gear and they start attacking everything, including the gut, to the point where their gut falls apart, to the point where they die sometimes from this. In this one study, in addition to the prednisone, they gave these people lithium. And what was amazing is that the guts of these people started healing much more effectively than without the lithium. Can you imagine this? The medication for the psychotic in microdoses helps the people that are suffering from bowel disease from a transplant? The BDNF and these anti-inflammatory effects may be warding off dementia down the road. It may be protecting us from Parkinson's down the road. It may be protecting you from a host of things. What is also really interesting about lithium, and something that we also don't talk about, is that lithium actually helps support the transport of folate and B12 into the nervous system. And for people who suffer from depression, it's because their brain chemicals are too low. And some of these people, their brain chemicals are too low because folate is not getting in appropriately to help drive the chemical production that we need for dopamine and all of these other things. So on one hand, lithium breaks the system and slows down the system. On the other hand, lithium, because it helps get folate and B12 into the brain cells and into the brain, actually can help with folate metabolism, which ultimately helps bring up mood because it helps increase the brain chemicals. You look at all of these different properties and you're like, oh my God, why are we not talking about this? Why are we still stuck in the stigma of lithium is for crazy people? Why are we still thinking that way when trace doses of this thing, if it was put into our multivitamins, it was in our water, we were supplementing, can change the lives of how many millions of people? A really strange thing that I've witnessed going along with this folate issue is that I've seen this astronomical rise in tongue ties in kids. And in some of the cases, and this is just pure conjecture, in some of the cases that have been the most severe tongue ties, I also found that the moms were all drinking reverse osmosis filtered water. Tongue ties are thought potentially to be a midline defect. And folate is actually a critical factor to help prevent midline defects. All of the moms that had these children with these bad tongue ties were taking folate, so it wasn't a lack of folate. What they were not getting was lithium. And interestingly enough, a lot of these kids that have the tongue ties also have the worst case of colic you can possibly imagine. They're irritable, they're reactive, they're just frazzled. Does that sound familiar? Does that sound familiar to you? The brain spazzes out because it can't handle the experience that it's having. The braking system isn't working in these children. They have a host of other issues, but the braking system isn't working in these children. Colic, sensory processing disorders, ADHD, anxiety, dementia. You look at the trail, it's staggering. And that's why I'm sharing this with you, because for pennies a day, you can find mineral replacements that have lithium in them. My favorite is lithium citrate that you can find online. Found in delicious tasting liquid. You can buy capsules of lithium for next to nothing. If you have any doubt about what I'm sharing with you, I have a ton of information on our website for you to look at. But more than looking at the information, I challenge you to consider one thing. Go buy some lithium. Go buy some magnesium. My favorite type of magnesium for the brain is magnesium threonate, and there's a bunch of companies that make it. Take a milligram of lithium and 100 milligrams of magnesium and see what it does for you in 2 weeks. I think you will be as pleasantly surprised as I was. Let's open up this conversation. Let's start sharing this information. Help get this word out to people, because we need to share this information. There's too many of us that are suffering unnecessarily, and it is so simple a thing for us to take care of. If you know of someone whose child is suffering, share with them these articles. Share with them this video. If you know of an adult that's suffering from anxiety, share with them this information. It may help them. And you know what? Yes, I would love everyone to be eating a healthy diet, and I would love for people to be meditating, and I would love for all of these things to be happening. But the reality is maybe some of us can't do that. Or we're not ready to do that. Maybe this could be the starting point, and even if it helps 20%, because the other pieces are in place, 20% is better than nothing, and it's safe and it's cheap. Let's change this conversation. Let's get people healthy, and let's make a difference for our community. Thank you for listening. This is Dr. K.